If you plan on raising chickens for eggs or meat and you're in the market for a new coop or your first coop maybe, you want to watch this video because I'll walk you through the 10 factors you need to consider before making a decision. And I wish I had known some of that information that I share with you in this video before we purchased our first coop for a lot of money that ultimately locked us into something that doesn't work for us anymore. So without further ado, let's walk through those 10 factors. Number one is you need to make a decision if you want to buy or build a coop. And depending on who you are, you might have already made that decision in your head. If you're an avid woodworker, chances are you've already decided you want to build that coop yourself. And I think that's the way to go. In my case, or in our case, I had zero woodworking experience before we got into homesteading. So we made the decision to purchase a coop instead and spend a lot of money in the process. But here is the thing. If you're into homesteading, you will need woodworking skills eventually, and the sooner you can acquire them, the better it is. Now, the good thing with chickens is they don't care about how perfect your structure is, how good it looks, or anything of that. The only thing they need is a safe and dry place to sleep, to spend the night, a place to lay their eggs, meaning nesting boxes, and to keep them safe from predators. And you can build that even with no very limited woodworking experience. And I highly encourage you to build your first coop as simply and as cheaply as you can, learn from those mistakes, and then you can do it better if the need arises. Instead of spending thousands of dollars, like in our case, on a structure that looks nice, that's rock solid, but that doesn't fulfill our needs anymore because our requirements have changed over the years. Factor number two is you need to decide if you want to pasture raise your chickens or coop them up, meaning keep them in an enclosed run that's attached to the henhouse. We decided from the get-go that we want to pasteurize our birds because we think it's the healthiest for the birds, for the final product, meaning for the meat or the eggs that we then consume. It's good for the soil, obviously, because chickens poop everywhere and they enrich the soil with nutrients. But that might influence your decision on what type of coop you want to build. Is it a mobile chicken tractor, or is it maybe something stationary with a large run, because the chickens are not going to get out and stay inside of that run the entire time? Manure control is incredibly important because it directly influences the health of your animal. If they're walking around in poop all day, if they're to their ankles in poop, they're not going to be healthy for very long. And there are usually two ways on how you can control manure effectively without spending a lot of time. The traditional way is you clean out the henhouse and the run frequently. And that gets old really quickly. I'm not a fan of doing that. So we decided to go a different route, meaning a deep litter method. So in our henhouse, we have at least a foot, a little bit more actually, of space so we can keep adding carbonaceous material, meaning wood chips or pine shavings or hemp bedding, that mixes then with the nitrogen in the chicken manure to produce compost. So it's a very easy and effective way to make compost without you having to do anything other than every so often you add carbonaceous material on top. That keeps it clean, that keeps it, reduces the odor, or there is actually almost no odor at all, and you get compost in 6 months to a year or so. The second method is you rotate your chickens frequently because they produce 50% of their manure at night. So especially in the henhouse, you're going to have a lot of manure. If you have a floor, if you have a mobile chicken tractor on the other hand, and you move that every couple of days, then you basically spread the manure over a large area. And that way you don't have to clean anything, you don't have to worry about deep littering or anything or adding carbonaceous material. You just move them every so often. So those are your two, there are three ways, but the frequent cleaning, again, nobody's a fan of. And so I highly recommend considering deep littering or rotation, as a way to control manure. Predator protection is also an important thing, there are aerial predators, there are land-based predators. Fortunately, where we live, it's mostly aerial, not so much land-based predators, because we have a pretty strong perimeter fence that nothing has been able to dig under or get over other than raccoons. But you need a safe place. And if you cannot stomach the loss of a chicken, then I highly recommend you to keep your chickens locked up. That's the best way of preventing losses from predators. Otherwise, you can only mitigate and reduce the risk. For land-based predators, that might mean, a guardian dog It might mean, electric fencing or perimeter fencing, generally speaking. It might be wire dug around. It might be a predator apron, like what we have around our chicken coop. So it's basically mesh wire, dug in around the perimeter of the coop so that nothing can dig underneath. Now, if you rotate your chickens, like in a mobile chicken tractor, you can use electric fencing for the night. And as far as aerial predators are concerned, I have a separate video on what I think is effective against those and that have worked for us and which ones don't work, so check that out. Factor number 5 is size and roosting space. Now, on average, you need approximately 1 foot of roosting space per hen. So in our case, our first coop or our first hen house is 6 feet wide and has 2 roosting bars. So we have 12 feet of roosting space in total for 12 hens. Now, realistically, you can probably fit, 14 or 15 hens in there. We've done that, but that means there is going to be more manure in the hen house, obviously. Higher manure load. But on average, you need 1 foot of roosting space. Now, the thing is, the more roosting space you have, the more birds you have, the more wiggle room you have. In other words, our second coop has 24 feet of roosting space. It's 8 feet wide and we have 3 roosting bars. And practically we can fit probably 30 birds in there, because right now we have just over 20 and it's half empty because they like to stay close together. And they are not the biggest breeds of birds. There are a lot of leghorns and other breeds, etc. So they don't really take the entire foot of roosting bar space. So you can fit more, and the bigger you get, the more wiggle room you have, because every inch you save per hen obviously then adds up and multiplies. But that's something to keep in mind. And the same thing goes for your run. If you need approximately 10 square foot of space in your run for hens if they're pastured, so if you let them out during the day. If you keep them cooped up or in the run all day, you need even more space. So that's something you want to consider. Flock size is an interesting one, because however many chickens you think you need or you will get, you probably end up with more. It's called chicken math. And we initially had or decided to get 12 chickens. We bumped it up to 14 just in case, 1 or 2 die in the first few days, as is so often the case when you get them in the mail from the hatchery. They sent us 17, only 1 died, and so we ended up with 16 hens. And then we realized, well, in year 2, after the second molt, their egg production slowed down noticeably. And so we needed to introduce a second flock, but we didn't want to get rid of the first flock yet because they were still laying, and we didn't want to have a period of no eggs whatsoever. So suddenly we realized, well, we actually have now a second flock. We don't have the space for a second flock, so we need to build a second coop. So keep that in mind from the beginning. That's particularly true if you're raising chickens for eggs. If it's meat birds and they're gone, in a couple of weeks anyway, that's not a concern usually. But with egg layers, you need to figure out how you want to migrate from the old flock to the new one. And there is likely going to be a time when you have 2 flocks in parallel and you need space for them. So that's why I like to have mobile, flexible, smaller infrastructure that I can replicate quickly. Building a second chicken tractor is way less time and way less costly than investing in another $7,000 coop with a run that we initially purchased. So that's one important factor to keep into account. Number 7 is, do you need a run or a hen house only? The first coop we got was a hen house with an attached and enclosed run. And we figured, well, we'll need that run because we didn't know any better. But then we realized, well, our chickens went in the morning, the door opens and they are all out and they are roaming around and on pasture. Why do we have a run? There was really no need for a run. So the second coop we built, or I built then, I didn't build a run, just a hen house, a very large hen house that can accommodate at least 30 birds without any run. So they get out in the morning and they go in the evening, and that's all it is. Now, here is the catch, however. There were times when a run would have been handy, especially for our second flock. And the first incident when we realized that a run would have been nicest is actually when we transitioned our chicks, or the poults, from the brooder to the outside. Because what we did with our very first flock, we just locked them into the run, and within a couple of days, they figured out that, well, they come from the hen house in the morning, they are in the run, and then they just go back up the ladder, that's where they sleep. With the second flock, since they are out on pasture, they slept just wherever they were. They didn't, connect that they had to go back to the hen house because there was so much space around them and so many opportunities to roost and to sleep that they didn't go back to the henhouse. So we were catching birds every night for a couple of days and putting them back into the henhouse. And I'm like, well, a run would have been nice because that could have automated the process. Also, if there are predators around, one day we had like a ton of hawks around and we just put them all into the run, which is enclosed to keep them safe, while maybe, so we didn't have to watch out. So those are cases where a run is useful. But overall, if you pasture raise them, if they're out anyway, you probably don't have to invest in a run, build one, or purchase one. Nesting box location number 8. Most of the hen houses that I've seen and the ones that we have here as well have a nesting box or nesting boxes attached to the outside. So you can easily go there from the outside. You can open the nesting box cover and you can collect the eggs without having to go inside. That's super convenient. The downside of having a nesting box attached to the hen house is that if the hen house has manure, especially in the morning when they poop all night and there is, everything is full of poop, and then they come into the hen house and step on the poop and then hop into the nesting box and maybe step on eggs or, whatever, you get dirty eggs, or the chances of having dirty eggs increases if the chickens get their feet dirty on the way to the nesting box. And that's where I think mobile nesting boxes that are not attached to the hen house, that might be on the outside or in an enclosed run or in a fenced-in area, have an advantage, because you can make sure that when the hen goes towards the nesting box, their feet are somewhat cleaner as if they were to go through the hen house. That's a consideration, and I think going forward we will do all mobile nesting boxes that are not attached to the hen house. Number 9 is feed and water. We made the decision from the get-go that we want to automate as much as possible. So we don't necessarily want to have to, feed and water them every single morning, because we travel sometimes, and so we want to be able to just be away for a few days knowing that our chickens have water and they have feed. We go down and check on it every day anyway, but still. And we tried a number of different waterers and feeders, and there are pros and cons to all of them. And I'm not going to go into all of those details, but the one we really like are the one from both the feeder as well as the waterer from Coop Works. They have feeding or feed silos that can hold up to 80 pounds of feed, that are somewhat rodent proof, that protect the feed from the elements, so when it doesn't matter if it rains, and that have enough space for multiple hens to feed at the same time. And they are mobile as well. They are heavy when they are full with 80 pounds of feed, but I can easily, lift up 80 pounds and move that silo to somewhere else. So it's very mobile as well, and it lasts for, depending on your flock size, for a week or even longer. And they also have a water silo that has a float valve, and you can attach a garden hose. So you never run out of water, because as soon as the water levels drop, the float valve opens the valve and the garden hose feeds fresh water into the silo, so you never run out of water either. It's perfectly automated, it's flexible, it's mobile, you can move it around, and we really love those products. So check out my in-depth Coop Works review, actually. I'm going to link that down below as well. Number 10, and that's where we got tripped up in the beginning, was the decision between a stationary coop and a mobile chicken tractor. And to be honest, when we started raising chickens several years ago, we didn't even know that there was such a thing as a mobile chicken tractor. We just assumed a chicken coop is you put it somewhere and that's where it is, period. And that's what we did twice. So we have now 2 chicken coops that are very much not mobile. So they are just in a spot where we thought they would be ideal, and that's it. And from there, the chickens can roam around. But very quickly we realized that we don't want to have our chickens just in our entire yard. There are places where we don't want them to be. So we now use flexible fencing to give them a paddock, and we change that paddock every week or every couple of days, depending on how large the paddock is. We rotate them so they can fertilize the soil, poop everywhere, and then we move them over and they have fresh pasture, fresh grass, and they don't completely destroy the pasture. The problem if you have a stationary coop and you want to rotate is that you always have to funnel your chickens back to that same coop. So that really limits how you can do your rotation, because you always have to provide a path back to the coop. And it's a pain in the butt, because sometimes that means you have a very long tunnel of fencing until you get to the pasture where you want them to be. And that's just very inconvenient and very inefficient at the end of the day. So in retrospect, I wish we would have never built stationary coops. Going forward, we will do everything using mobile chicken tractors. And there are a couple of ones, I'm going to link them down below then as well. And I'm going to show them what we have from, the Suskovich or Salatin or Justin Rhodes, they all have mobile chicken tractors that can house a good number of hens, and they're light enough so you can move them maybe every day, maybe every couple of days, maybe every week. And so all the manure gets automatically distributed. You don't have to worry about, long fence lines. You can just, have a flexible fencing around the coop, give them a couple of, square yard or whatever, however big you want to do it. And that is it. That is super flexible. You can easily then take them with you. If you, let's say we move, we're going to move soon to a new property. We're not going to take or disassemble our coops. It's way too complicated and they're too heavy to take in one piece. But with a chicken tractor, we can load them on a trailer or even disassemble them real quick. Not a problem whatsoever. So that's the thing that I would highly encourage you to consider if you have any way of rotation, if you have a little bit of space where it's conducive to rotate the chickens or to not have them in the same spot all the time, to use mobile infrastructure. And again, Suskovich has a great chicken tractor. We use that as well. Justin Rhodes with his Jigsaw is a great option. And there are even, some ones, if you want to get like commercial grade ones, like, that are built from hen gear. They're portable chicken tractors. There are even some that are big enough for up to 1,000 chickens, and they are lightweight and you can move them yourself. So that's a great way of doing it. Now here's the thing to wrap up this video, really think about how you want to approach your coop situation, because chances are your requirements or what you think you need today is going to change. So you want to build something that can adapt to your changing requirements. And in my opinion, the best way of doing this is to build mobile infrastructure that can be moved, and that's not expensive to build. So if you have to build another one because you're adding chickens, you can easily do that without breaking the bank. And our first coop that we purchased cost almost $7,000. A lot of money, meaning that you will never ever recoup that money from a return on investment perspective, by raising your own chickens and raising your own eggs at the end of the day. So very expensive. It looks great, rock solid. It's probably gonna last for decades, but it just doesn't meet our requirements anymore. So take this into account, think about those factors, and build something that remains flexible and that can adapt to your changing needs. I hope you liked this video. If you did, let us know in the comments. If you didn't, let us know as well. And I hope we'll see you in the next video.